all right. The red light is blinking. I am sitting here with Adam Lieb from Astro House and their Freewrite Traveler. How's it going, Adam?
I'm doing well. How are you, Sean?
I'm doing fantastic. So let's get a little audio check level. The thing we like to do here on the Successfully Funded podcast is ask our guests what they had for breakfast today.
Coffee. That's
Just
always
coffee.
my breakfast. That's it. Plain and simple.
No proteins, no whatevers.
Oh, actually, I did have a yogurt this morning.
There you go. I've been doing the CrossFit and lifting thing all during COVID, so I had my shake.
Good for you.
My chalk water. Awesome. So, all right. So, you had a wildly successful campaign. Why don't you kind of give us the rundown of the origin of this product?
Yeah, this product, Freewrite Traveler. So we call it a distraction-free writing tool. It builds off of our distraction-free writing tool line that we originally started with the original Freewrite, which was actually launched as a crowdfunding campaign all the way back in December 2014. Now, that product we called the Hemmingwrite initially, subsequently changed to Freewrite, but we had this concept to create a distraction-free writing tool that sort of married simple interface from tools of yesteryear with digital documents and all the benefits that come with that. And so we had a lot of success with the original product. Like I said, we did that original crowdfunding campaign in 2014. We started shipping it. It was December. So basically we took all of 2015 to do the product design and the manufacturing. We started shipping in 2016 and have been shipping it ever since. And then sort of shortly thereafter, we had this concept to really take the same idea, this distraction-free software, and repackage it into something that's smaller and folding, which is what became the Freewrite Traveler. And so we finally launched that on Indiegogo in October 2018, which is 2 years ago now. Hard to imagine, but it's been a long journey finally getting that product out to shipping, which we've finally done starting in October of 2020. So
fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a wild journey.
So let's unpack the genesis of this. So going back to the Hemingway / original Freewrite. Reading the Kickstarter or the original campaign, it seems to be all about excuse me, I'm a little cough here. It seems to be all about eliminating all the real distractions of working on a computer and the tactile distractions that are involved in writing these days. Sorry, can you give us a little bit more on that? Let me start over. I got to edit out those coughs because that's just way too much coughing. Why don't we jump right in with you? I'm going to ask you, tell me about the origins of
Sure.
this idea. The Diet Coke. All right. So why don't you tell us about the origins of this idea?
So we came up with this distraction-free writing concept originally during a conversation about software and all the distraction-free software that modern authors are using on their laptops and computers. And it just sort of came out during that initial discussion. If writers are using this software to sort of dumb down their computers and, provide this sort of special environment that helps them stay focused, like maybe there was something where we could bring sort of this really simple software environment, but then marry it with better hardware. So, our laptops are multi-purpose devices. They're not really designed for writing. They're designed for doing all kinds of things. And so, the keyboards have sort of gotten worse and worse. The screens are for, doing editing and looking at photos and video and content, but content, consumption a lot of times. And so we just had this idea. It was like, again, it was the first conversation. And at the time I'd really been into mechanical keyboards, and I also am a huge Kindle fan. And so just like, oh, okay, well, why don't we take this really simple software experience? We can put a e-ink screen in there because it's great to look at. It's not like a traditional LCD. You can write outside. It's super low power. And then also put in a really great mechanical keyboard. So you have that awesome tactile experience that sort of has gone by the wayside. And so again, this was back in 2014. Now actually mechanical keyboards have seen like a resurgence. But back then it was really they were really sort of gone by the wayside. They had a niche in sort of like the gamer and programmer community, but other than that, they were very, very small, small niche. And so, yeah, we just had this idea to kind of bring these components together and see what happened.
Yeah, let's unpack some of these details, because I think these are the reason these subtle touches are why it's so successful. So let's start with the keyboard. I have several writer friends, and to say persnickety about not only just the feel of the typewriter or the keyboard, but the entire environment that they have to create around themselves to kind of be able to be in the headspace of writing. And when you're using one of the modern keyboards, which we all get with our Macs or whatnot, that can take them out of it and get them into writer's block. So talk to me about what you're trying to recreate or get back to with this mechanical keyboard.
The entire concept of the product is to remove as much friction from the writing process, and also to sort of make it as enjoyable as possible. And I think, that interface, which is the keyboard from, your mind to your hands to the device, is so critical. And the way that we think about it is like, well, how can we sort of like allow the user, the customer, to enjoy the writing process more? And and again, there's been a technology that's persisted. These mechanical keyboards. While laptops have sort of gone one way, these mechanical keyboards have kind of persisted as like these really incredible, tactile devices that are still such a joy to use, but they're sort of, become smaller and smaller in terms of like availability and like seeing them in real life. And so, but it's not like, that technology still exists, and we just sort of like brought it back and brought it back into sort of the writing community, which again, like they weren't really the ones that were using those keyboards. It was, gamers and programmers.
Right.
And so, yeah. And I think once we sort of reintroduce this sort of like desktop style mechanical keyboard, that's the one thing that people really continuously tell us like how much they love.
Yeah. And it's something I like to key on, because, we just did the Cream magazine documentary that came out this summer. We crowdfunded, and I was one of the guys filming it. And both in the interviews of the writers, and then you can see this evidence in a scene in Almost Famous, a talk between Lester Bangs and the character that represents Cameron Crowe. One of the first questions that Lester asked him is, what typewriter are you using? And it's this like you're in the inside club if you're using the right typewriter that has the right, focus. And, there's a big scene in Cream of a fight between Dave Marsh and Lester Bangs. It's, the worst thing that Dave Marsh could do to Lester to get under his skin was to mess with his typewriter. and it's that subtle game of disrupting the flow, disrupting the feel, disrupting that tactile interface with the writing that I gotta imagine the hardcore writers buying your project are keyed into that factor, and that's a big selling point
for sure. And I think one of the things that I realized, actually coming into this as a non-writer, I've written blog posts, but I've never written a book or anything like that, is that after talking to lots and lots and lots of writers at this point, really coming to understand that, while it may seem extreme for a writer to buy this expensive, very niche device, turns out that I'd say pretty much every writer has some method to help them stay focused.
Totally. Yeah.
And, you've heard, there's sort of these famous stories. Jonathan Franzen has an old Dell laptop that he puts glue in the Ethernet ports because, even just not having a Wi-Fi card wasn't enough. He had to really sabotage it. Or George R.R. Martin, sort of famously also uses an old DOS machine with WordStar. And there's just, loads and loads of stories. And even people, this really blows my mind, but, writing longhand, with pen and paper.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine writing a 50,000 word book longhand.
It's such a subtle Easter egg in pop culture. Again, a big Aaron Sorkin fan. If you look at The West Wing and you look at Studio 60, the short-lived series right after it, there's so many subtle nods to the writing process baked into those characters. And you're always seeing Sam Seaborn when he gets really blocked, he just pulls out the yellow pad Is that's, so I think that is, gotta be one of the big features, but that's only half of the story. Let's talk about what I think is really the big contributor to cutting down the distraction is your screen and the way it connects and uploads the content.
Yeah, the screen is unusual because, while people have generally experienced the e-ink screen like in a Kindle, it's never really been used in a writing device. And there's some definitely some compromises because it's not nearly as fast to refresh as an LCD. But that's also why we really focus the device on the drafting process and not the editing process. And this is also sort of baked into it, and it's worth mentioning. The Freewrite concept, both devices, really are meant to be they're really meant as tools within a very specific writing process where you draft top to bottom and then you edit later. Right. And so it's there's research, there's a lot of history about sort of how this is actually taught in a lot of like MFA programs and writing courses, where when you separate sort of the creative from the critical mind, you can really optimize for each of those processes.
Totally.
The Freewrite is really, really meant to be just a drafting machine. And we've taken a lot of steps to really take out a lot of the editing functionality as well, just in the hopes that it can help people sort of get in that flow state and stay there. And so the screen, because it's e-ink, it's not as fast as an LCD, but because the whole device is really trying to keep you moving forward, the screen in a lot of ways is just, it almost becomes an afterthought. And we hear from a lot of writers that it's great to look at, but they find themselves sort of staring into space a lot of times. Right. It's something that it's just a backup really to see what they've been writing. And they're allowed to just kind of let the words flow out. And that's exactly what we hoped, when we created the device. And the cool thing about the screen is that it really does look like paper in a lot of ways. And we always have this really funny experience where we've taken the devices to shows, whether it's like BookCon or Book Expo or AWP, and we'll have very, purposely, like we have put sort of a little spotlight on the device, and the more light that you put on it, the more fake it looks. Right. And so people will come up and they'll think these are just demo models or something. And then I, hit some keys and then they change. And it's like, wow, what? That's a real, like, what, we always get these really funny responses. Like, that's a real thing that's working. And how does it look like that? It looks like a sticker or something that the key that has the words on it.
Yeah. Your hero image, I know that's the real device, and it looks like a render. It's like, no, that can't be right. That's the real thing. Yeah.
It's the real thing. And so it's a cool implementation of that e-ink technology that I love. And it's super low power. So, you can take it anywhere and it's got the battery life. And so it's just, again, it's really optimized for the writing process, where laptops can do lots of other things, but they don't do this type of writing as well as the Freewrite does.
Totally. So I wanted to ask all those technical questions and kind of unpack that, because I think that this campaign, and Jeff and I have talked about this, that you've touched on something that is pretty rare in the crowdfunding space, where you've got a physical design that is the manifestation of this place that creatives need to go to, and we most creatives can speak to this. Like, I'm a drummer and I do video work, right? So, when I'm deeply engaged in those two things, you're trying to get to a headspace where you kind of disconnect from yourself, and you're really truly in the creative groove. And what you were talking about is, writers staring off into space and this becoming this backup. That you just rarely have a device that is truly an assistant to that. Before, it's all mental, right? It's, what am I doing to my space? What am I doing, in my diet or my routine or my plan to get myself there? And, this is kind of a unicorn in that space, and pretty genius. And I'm curious, is how the feedback has fueled the crowdfunding success of the first product flowing into this product.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
I mean, that's why we're hot on this. I mean, it's so rare that you see that. There's only a handful of devices I can think of out there that can do that.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is it really makes a statement, and there's values that drive the product design. And one of them I just mentioned, which is keeping the writer moving forward at all costs. And so when it comes to making design decisions, we can always point back to, well, does this keep the writer moving forward, and does it not? And then that's a really good way to decide whether you should, add LED backlighting or whatever it is.
Right.
And I think the thing my background is mechanical engineering. I've focused on product design now, and I'm definitely love product design and I've thought a lot about it. But I think one of the most important concepts is that most people, well, I shouldn't say most people. I think one of the most important concepts is that when you add something, you're almost by definition taking away from something else.
Right.
And there's and it doesn't feel like that, when you just look at something, but that is how it works. And like marketing is a perfect example, right? Like if you spread your message too thin, like you talk about too many different things, then nothing really matters. Right. Like nothing resonates, right?
Yeah. What is this thing? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, and product design is exactly the same. Even though, it may seem like, oh, well, we can just bury this feature just for those people that really want it. But, there's no way around the fact that even if you have this extra little feature, that's going to take away from some of the core value. And so we take that really seriously. And that's why the Freewrite is like, it's such a hardcore device in terms of like its purity. Like we really were draconian in terms of how we decided what's going to be on it and what's not. And I think moving into the Traveler, it gave us an opportunity to introduce some different things. The big thing was that with Freewrite, there's no arrow keys. And on our first Kickstarter, there was a couple almost like mutinies. Like I thought people were going to like come to my house about arrow keys. It was like, it was unbelievable. And, but people were really incensed about the idea that there would be no arrow keys on this writing device. Like, how could you? And, and people would say to us stuff like, well, how dare you tell us how to write? Yeah. And I don't know, I'm not telling anyone how to write. I'm just making a tool for a specific type of writing process. And if you don't follow that writing process, that's completely fine and up to you. Then it's just, and I understand because people see the product and they think like, well, it's so close to what I want, right. Just make this thing for me. But that's just not, that's just not how I do things. Like, I make it for the people that want it, like there are other people out there. We don't make it for any one specific person.
They've clearly never heard of the Steve Jobs function key wars then, right?
Right. Right. So, but I think with Traveler, because it is another product, right. Like we did have an opportunity to sort of think about how we could, augment it. And we did add these hotkey enabled arrow keys. We also added a document manager. So it's a little bit more standalone. You don't have to go back to Postbox, which is our cloud service, to do some things like deleting documents, for example. And I think that's fine. And also it's smaller, it's portable. So I think there's a different context for the device as well. And, so far we've shipped several thousand of them out to customers, and we've had, overwhelmingly really good feedback.
Yeah. So let's shift to the marketing story of this. How did the word of mouth spread? How did you get the word out to specifically the Traveler campaign to achieve what you did with nearly 2,600 backers at $750,000?
Yeah. And we took two very different approaches between the original Freewrite Kickstarter and the Traveler Indiegogo campaign. not only are they on two different platforms, but
Right.
two different approaches, two different times in our life cycle. At the beginning, we had no company, we had no people, we had no real community. Traveler was 4 years into our company, and we had customers and all that stuff. So we also had a failed Kickstarter in between that. So that actually taught us some hard lessons as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we learned some hard lessons with that. And it also pushed us back to our writing community, because that middle one, which was for this concept called Clapboss, was more of a smart homey gadget type of thing. So it wasn't really for our writing community. And we thought it was really clever, and we don't need to go into it, but it eventually it just didn't really take off. And so we decided to pull the plug. But so in terms of marketing, I'd say we did a very traditional sort of, I don't know what I would call like an experienced crowdfunding launch. So we had a big pre-launch campaign. And I think one of the most important things that we did is we didn't rely on our existing customer list. We actually went out there and made a landing page or a couple landing pages and drove traffic to it and created, buzz for that specific project, which was the Freewrite Traveler. We didn't, again, like you could imagine, well, we already have all these Freewrite customers and we have a pretty big email list. Like a bunch of those people will probably want it. And that's true. But we didn't rely on that. We made our own email list just for that project. And, I think this is pretty typical advice, and I agree with it. I think we built, 8,000 to 10,000 people or something just specifically for that product launch.
Right.
And then, we did the thing. And we had a video made, and we did Facebook and, paid advertising and the whole thing.
Well, that conversion rate tracks. Like if you had about 10,000, you're going to see anywhere from a 20 to 30% conversion on that email list. And that's right about where you landed here at 2,600 backers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of it's tricky because the Indiegogo thing goes so long, because we didn't really close, because that includes in-demand people. And I think by the end of the actual like live campaign, we were probably we were in the 600s. But then also we sold a similar amount on our website over the last 2 years. So all in, I mean, I think we did over 1.5, in pre-sales.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But, it's 2 years of...
2 years. Well, that's, that is one of the, people talk about the differences between the two platforms. Mm-hmm. And, Kickstarter definitely, I think, when you have a product that resonates, there's a community there to support it. And, that if you have a product that resonates is the caveat to that. Most people, think it's this money cloud that rains down on ideas, and that's not true.
Yeah, definitely not true.
But with that comes some limitations on what you can do in the back end of your ad targeting. And Indiegogo operates more like a traditional e-com platform where you can do retargeting campaigns, retention campaigns. So, it doesn't surprise me that you had this nice long tail of, raising about another, almost 500,000, right? Between your website and that. Yeah. So that is, if you've done that work, like you said, of building that list, you can see long-term benefits by using the platform. I'm curious, when I started following you, immediately an ad pops up, which kudos to you. But the ad was kind of a case study of one of your writers. I'm curious as to how using your customer experience fueled your ad experience.
Yeah, it's something that we've been trying to get better at, which is putting a lot more user testimonials out there. And we have ads that are running all different kinds of creative. Mm-hmm. And we've in the last year, I think we've done a much better job of actually soliciting testimonials from our customer base. And it's funny because our product, it's funny, right? It's writers are not known for being having a lot of disposable income, right. And our product is relatively expensive, and we obviously know that. And so I think like we've definitely had like A-list writers and screenplay writers and actors and all kinds of people buy the product. I think they're always a little bit they're just like a little sensitive about showing it off because it's like, oh, here's me fancy person with a $500 hipster typewriter thing.
Well, not only that, when you become known, your name is a type of capital, right?
Sure.
And giving it away, sometimes that
Yeah.
can be transactional. Yeah.
But what the reality is that we do track like sort of usage in general, and we've had over 100 million words have been written on the devices, and now lots of books and lots of screenplays have been published and written on them. So I'm like, well, we need to encourage these writers, to
Help
tell
us.
their friends. Yeah, like that, and we do get a lot of benefit by the fact that writers are relatively well connected, and they belong to writers groups, and they're on Twitter predominantly, and so they are sharing, a lot, I think. But we just, it's something that we're trying to focus on, really encouraging people to share their experiences.
Yeah. Well, it was a very effective ad. Like that's what I said. The first thing I saw it, I was like, "Oh, nice idea."
Thank you.
I like that. Yeah. So it's how do you deal with the niche of your audience, right? At some point, especially if you're doing large scale digital marketing, there's only going to be a finite number of people that fit, what you're targeted for. How do you project earnings in the future and your roadmap in the future, knowing that there's X number of writers in the world that are going to use this?
Yeah, it's something we've had to deal with. Especially with the original Freewrite, that was super niche. Not only was it, relatively expensive writing tool, but it was also a writing tool that was meant to go within a specific writing philosophy, which is this drafting and then editing thing. And so not only did you have to find a customer that was willing to spend that kind of a money on a dedicated writing device, but they also had to be willing to, or already bought into this distraction-free, drafting-only concept. That's like a pretty big sell.
Yeah, the Venn diagram gets narrower. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Which, has its benefits as well, because we did have some success, the product also becomes a bit of like a, it's a statement piece, right? Like if you see someone with a Freewrite, it's like, that person's pretty serious, like they've really made a commitment, and they have, like they've also thought about their writing process enough that they're willing to just focus on drafting. And they understand, like, okay, this is how I'm going to, get as many words out. Oh man, grammar. Get as many words out on the page as possible. So I think when we're developing new products, with Traveler for sure, we were, we wanted to expand our, market size.
Right.
And, one of the ways we could do that is by, having something that's lower cost. Another way is sort of having an industrial design, a look that's maybe more amenable to some people, even though I think the original Freewrite is still awesome and something special. But we spent a lot of time, making the Traveler fit with our brand, but also, again, it's laptop-esque.
Right.
It's definitely not a regular laptop. But maybe you won't get quite as many looks if you were in a coffee shop.
Well, portability has been solved, right? You don't have to reinvent how this will fold.
That's
fit.
True.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's super. It's 1.6 pounds. It's half the footprint of a laptop. And we spent a lot of time and energy getting it down to that form factor, and also still having a full size keyboard because it's for writing. So and I think that's sort of our plan. It's like with every new product, sort of just edging out our customer base, not abandoning our customers, but again, like what would our customers want, and then some.
Yeah. So how does that translate into your marketing efforts? Like what kind of ads, what kind of strategies are you using to address that outcome?
I think of marketing as almost entirely a way to just encourage word of mouth conversations. And, we present the product to people the first time, but especially with an expensive sort of niche device, it's so rare that people would just be like, I'm going to buy that. So for us, I think of our marketing again, like that's again why we want to use these user testimonials, because it really requires people to hear about it from someone they trust. And so I think whenever we're doing marketing campaigns, it's all about, that social proof. I really believe in that very strongly, and just in trying to encourage that as much as we can.
So, by definition, that means that your social media strategy has to have a heavy emphasis on engagement. How much energy are you putting into keeping conversation going?
Well, we're trying. I mean, but we also do everything really bad, poorly. I don't know what the right word is, but I mean, we have a tiny team. There's 5 of us.
Right.
So, and actually, I only hired our first marketing person this year. Never had a full-time marketing person until August of this year. So, I mean, we've had a lot of ideas, and we've obviously been doing marketing, but everyone that's been, writing our emails or strategy or whatever, that's always like their second job. And so now we actually have a full-time marketing person, and she's great. And we have someone that's, engaging, but we need more people. I mean, there's too much work to do. I mean, Mark,
Right.
You can spend, as you well know, right? Like you can spend all day engaging on just one platform, let alone Twitter, Pinterest, at LinkedIn. It's just, you can do this forever.
Yeah, let alone reacting to changes in the platform and where your audience is moving to, adjusting to. Yeah,
precisely. So we're trying. I think, and right now that all these people are finally getting their travelers after some of them waiting for a very long time, my goal is I've been really encouraging, let's keep that buzz going. Like, let's encourage people to do unboxing videos. Let's, promote that content. Let's, repost, let's reshare. We'll just constantly be kind of like keeping that buzz going.
Great. Yeah. It's just such when you say a statement piece, I think that is one of the biggest things that if I were a writer receiving one of these and I wanted to talk about it, it says so much more about my choice in a piece of technology, but communicating, like you said, this is my philosophy of writing. When you're looking at me, that this is how much thought I put into the preparation, and with different creatives, you can tell those things. Like, when you're a drummer, what does a person's practice environment look like? What tools are they using? What, is it focused on what I'm hearing and when I'm playing in the drums, or is it full of like, lounge chairs and bongs and what other distractions are going on in those spaces? If I can imagine, if you're especially a professional writer and you're in a writer's room in LA, or you're meeting with a publisher and you pull out this device, you're instantly communicating, what type of professional you are.
Yeah, and I think that's what brands used to do. I think they do a lot less now. Brands are so big, that it's harder to find like a brand statement that's so different than anyone else. Like, is Nike's brand statement so different than Under Armour? If you see someone with Nike, I think it's hard. Whereas, certainly creative tools. Guitars are a good example. You're a drummer. Yeah. I think I'm a very terrible guitarist, but there are statements. People that play Fenders. They know that there are different sort of like pluses and minuses, and there's tone, right, to that specific style. And they understand like, well, that's Fender, right?
Yeah.
And then if you have a Gibson Les Paul or something else, right, like that's a different style. And yeah, you can play the same songs on both guitars, but there's just it's a different statement because it's a different tone. There's different, neck shapes and all these things. And again, I think it's harder to find that these days with brands, because brands are less willing to have keep that consistent statement. Like, this is what we are.
It's not just off Fender or Les Paul. It's what model are you using and how is the action, and what the action of a guitar, or looking at the pickup choices, really communicate this person really cares about the feel, the tactile connection to the instrument. That's why for drummers, That's why, yeah, sure, the shells are important, but the head choice and stick choice is that's the ball game right there.
Right.
What you're using in those two elements where skin is connecting with the instrument. That's our version of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a few others. I'm trying to think of them. I mean, watches are sort of a good example as well.
Yeah.
It says the choice. There's so many choices of watches, and what someone chooses, whether they like it or not, probably does say something about themselves, right?
Totally.
And that's I think that's cool.
This is an interesting point because I was in the Apple marketing team right around when iPod became widespread and ended as iPad was really settled in. And back in that era, the white earbud was the statement, right?
Sure.
Like if you saw someone with a white earbud, there's things you knew about them. They're not using an iRiver or iPod. And I think a healthy argument can be said of Apple that they've lost whatever it was that connected them to something special. It's become so huge and so mass that these things are meaningless at this point. What the AirPod is, or the color of the space gray keyboard and cable was the other indicator of there's something different about this.
Right.
I'm making my statement. Have you thought about that aspect? As you're growing the company, what types of things that set you apart that are going to be statement pieces for your audience?
I think about it all the time, but I also have a conflicting idea, which is I think most people that go into creating products think too much about brand. So this will contradict everything I just said. But I do think because really a brand takes time. It's not just a product. It takes time. And for I think it's hard for me to express, but I think, what we see as brands, as consumers, that's most of the time that's like a lifelong experience of that brand, right?
Sure.
And you can't just make that in a single product launch.
Right.
And I think for new creators, trying to think too much about brand will end up just confusing the hell out of your product and end up not, it's putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah. Back in the day, we kind of Trojan horsed the iPod by letting HP license it. And
interesting.
So you go back and look at how Apple broke that barrier. It was the HP iPod. But there was this joke running around Apple's campus that we got in trouble for. It was a video of what if we license iPod to Microsoft, and what would they do to it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's immediately festooned with all these extra features and call out and pull tabs on the box, where at the time the marketing was just, here's this object. It was the most purest and simple. And I think that fast forward now, Apple is more reflective of the joke we used to have than the simplicity of it. And I think the overthinking that is definitely a factor there.
Yeah. So I think about it, especially as we build out our product family. I think that's how I try to think about it. But when it's any one individual product, I still just try to make that product as well as I can.
So I think, not to be the marketing slappy, but I think that was reflected in how your page flows and your experience with the, the crowdfunding as well. I mean, these are very focused pages. You're not trying to oversell or over feature the audience.
Yeah. I think that's by design, but it might also just be laziness. I'm not sure.
This kind of happened. Yeah. Well, kudos to this. Such a unique experience when these things come together, either by design or accident. But definitely one to watch. So, the Indiegogo is closed right now. If someone wants to get a traveler, how do they go about it?
It is closed, but we are now shipping. So our website, which is getfreewrite.com, has all of our, that's our store. So anyone can go there and pick up a Freewrite or the new Traveler or accessories and give it a shot.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, this has been. Thank you for indulging me in writer nerddom and product design. But everyone, go check out this Traveler. And even if you're not a writer, if you're a crowdfunder, if you're a marketer, I think that there's so much you can learn from these concepts of this, thinking about your audience in these ways, and what you said about don't add so much. Think about removing it. Think what happens if I pile on X feature or Y feature, and such a lesson to be learned for a successful campaign here. Check it out, crowdfunders. This is an important one. Adam, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right.